Danielle Salovich. I'm the National President of the American Medical Student Association. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to go ahead with our traditional medical student panel. I'm going to go ahead and allow the panelists to introduce themselves, and then we'll go right into your live questions.
Hi, my name is Eric Lau. I'm a recent UC Davis graduate from 2009. I majored in NPB, and I'm currently at Toro, California.
Hi, my name is Lara Driggers. I went to Cal State Long Beach. I majored in biochemistry, chemistry, and minored in biology. And I currently go to UC Davis, and I'm a third-year medical student.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Allison Tran. I went to UC Davis and graduated in 2009, majoring in physiology. And currently I am a second-year DO student at Toro University in California.
Hi, my name is Yolanda Tejeda. I grew up in Sacramento, went to community college at American River College, and then went to UC Berkeley for 2 years. I'm currently a first-year medical student at University of California, San Francisco.
Thank you. So our first question from our audience is, what do you know now that you wish you would have known as a pre-medical student? And we'll go ahead and start with you, Eric.
Okay. Well, I guess in general, one thing is to be sure to apply early. But I think one major lesson that I learned and I'd like to pass on to you guys is be very careful. Be very careful when you pick who your professors are for your letters of recommendation. Some of them might have a reputation for being a bit late. That unfortunately happened to me. So be very careful. Keep a broad spectrum of open professors for who you seek your letter from.
For me, I guess it doesn't really matter where you go to school. Coming from a state school, I was kind of given the roundabout and thought I wasn't as good as an applicant as I would have been if I went to a UC school. And so I guess my big major thing is don't apply to 40 schools. Keep it small. Pick out your schools of what you want. And believe it or not, you're actually a better applicant than you think. And it's not about grades. It's not about where you went to undergrad. It's more about who you are and what you have to offer.
So during when you're applying for medical school, make sure to Google yourself and to see what shows up, because you would be so surprised what will come out with your name. And some schools will actually Google you and ask you questions like, hey, I saw this video of you on YouTube doing this. You don't want that to happen, especially if it's a bad video, so check.
I would echo everything that was already said, and then I could just take it a step further and just emphasize just to have more faith in yourself than you have. You really never know what your chances are of getting into whatever school, so if you feel like you really want to go there, even though it's ranked somewhere as a top 5 school, but you don't think you have a chance, just apply. You really don't know. And also, this is a piece of advice that I did listen to, and I'm glad that I did, is don't apply until you are ready. What does that mean to be ready? You'll know. You'll know that you've had enough experiences and that you're ready to move on to that next step. So just be sure to think about that when you're considering when you're going to apply.
Thank you. And so we actually have a follow-up question for Jennifer. A lot of our audience was interested and curious about being Googled and what exactly to look out for. And if you have any specific advice or any examples that you can share with them.
Okay. So in the 7th grade, I had a live journal, and I totally forgot about that when I was in college because I was middle school, it was a long time ago. And I guess when I was interviewing, somebody had found an entry that I had written in the 7th grade, and that's a really awkward time, and then so they brought it up, and I was very embarrassed, but I did explain to them that this was when I was 12 and not when I'm 22, and then I went back and kind of deleted all of my entries, so just watch out for that.
Thank you. I think it's important also, with Facebook and knowing, what access level, what you choose to put on Facebook. We've really become an internet savvy, generation. And so, I think Googling, especially from many admissions committees, is a common practice at this point to see what's out there, and that comes up with everything from funny YouTube clips that you've created to your friends to, comments that you posted on Facebook or within different groups. It's very interesting to see what comes up. So I do think it's a good recommendation to Google yourself. So another question is focusing a little bit on what you brought up in letters of recommendation, Eric. And you said kind of know the reputation on campus about letters coming in possibly late. What was your strategy in going about getting letters of recommendation? Who did you get them from? Why did you choose those people? And kind of what guidance did you have to pick them?
All right, so I was actually the president of the local chapter of Davis here. I'm sorry, of AMSA Davis here. And I actually had a professor for my cardio renal respiratory class. And for AMSA, we actually had a program where we took blood pressure at the Davis Farmers Market. So basically, I would try to approach professors about extracurricular activities that I was doing and try to integrating what I've learned in their class to try to get, try to show that I'm interested in their material and I'm trying to apply it elsewhere.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. All right. So, so definitely, I would definitely recommend to try to integrate your extracurricular activities and show that you're really passionate about what you're learning in their class and that you're trying to bring out to the community if you can. That's a good strategy for getting a letter of recommendation.
Thank you. So the next question is for the whole panel, and we'll start down with you, Yolanda. Is basically, what did you think your strengths were with your application? We all know that there are general requirements for entry into medical school, but what do you feel like made you stand apart as a candidate and you're very proud of?
So I think looking at my application sort of retrospectively, I studied public health as an undergrad. I was very interested in doing community-based work, and I did that for a couple years. I think that is something that sort of set me apart in a sense. While there are plenty of applicants that are have background in public health, it's hard to pick out one thing that makes me distinctly unique, but I felt like in my particular application that was a strength that I had. Also coming from community college, I also feel like while I was at one point concerned that would sort of make me less competitive, having taken my pre-med requirements there, I also feel like that was something that unique that I have to offer, and can share my experiences with that. Even now as a medical student and also, going forward.
I think one of my greatest strengths was my age. So when I applied for medical school, when I sent in my primary, I was 20. And some schools saw that as a weakness. They said, it didn't seem like you had a lot of life experience. But I said, okay, I am 20, but look at what I've done. So one of my proudest accomplishments at UC Davis was starting Red Balloon, which is a not-for-profit organization sponsoring music therapy programs at the UC Davis Children's Hospital. So I was so proud of this, and I was really proud that I started this when I was 18. And so even though people were a bit skeptical, I had a lot of things to back up with my age.
For me, I was a ballet dancer beforehand, and I actually danced professionally with companies, and so that kind of made me stand out a bit more than people, just given that I was a biochem major. You don't usually find those two go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. The other thing was I was also my mom's primary caretaker, and so I had a really good hands-on experience with that. And then there's also a really cool program out there called Clinical Care Extenders, which kind of, it's like a shadowing program, but gets you to rotate through the entire hospital. So a lot of schools that I interviewed at really enjoyed the fact that I actually got a little bit more than just a regular shadowing experience and got to really see what all the different fields of medicine as well.
So what do you believe are your strengths that made you stand out as an applicant?
Okay. All right. I think what really helped me out as an applicant was just getting involved in leadership and everything that I possibly could. So at the Hall Aging Clinic, you really should try to not stay content just working as a helper in the clinic, but rather try to take up a leadership position. Get to know the doctors that are involved, and then also, if you're part of a pre-med organization or whatever, just try your best to try to work your way up and also get more involved in the community. I think that's something that I try to strive for all the time, and I think helps me quite a bit.
And then if I could just add something else
Go
that
ahead.
I feel like is really worth mentioning. I'm a first generation college student, the first person in my family that will become a physician. And so I think that was something that was a strength in my case, because I didn't grow up having sort of the background and what it takes to go to medical school and how to become a doctor. So I really had to navigate my resources in that way. And so I think one admissions, dean of admissions phrased it in such a way that schools are also not only looking at the final destination that you reach in terms of where you stand with your application, but also the distance that you've traveled. So that's something to keep in mind if you are sort of in that same, coming from that same place.
I agree. Okay, so there's a lot of questions about allopathic versus osteopathic training and what that means and why you would pick one versus the other. And I understand that we have 2 aspiring DOs on the panel and 2 aspiring MDs. And so if we can start with the osteopathic students and why you chose to apply and then pursue a career in osteopathic medicine.
Okay, well, for me, I actually learned Chinese martial arts, wushu, for a long time, and I was actually a coach. So osteopathic medicine does use some similar techniques that we used in Kung Fu training, such as muscle energy and so on. So I was naturally kind of drawn towards the osteopathic manipulative medicine side. But that being said, I was also just interested in being a normal doctor as well. So I thought that it was very interesting to be a normal doctor, but also be able to explore this interest that I had developed while as a coach in martial arts. So that's my side.
Thank you, Eric.
So I think the biggest difference between like osteopathic medicine versus allopathic medicine is the fact that DO students have to take a course called OMM, which stands for Osteopathic Manipulative Medicine. And in this class, we learn a lot of techniques like muscle energy, myofascial release. So things we're able to put our hands onto people and diagnose. So we believe everything, the body itself, is one functional unit. So you could have, a headache, but the problem could actually be in your sacrum. So we can be able to, put our hands on the sacrum and be able to diagnose what's wrong and then to fix it, and then your headache could go away. And so I was pretty much sold on that idea that the body was connected, because it just makes so much sense that, a person can come in having a problem, but maybe it's just not there in their head. Maybe it's just somewhere else, and you just have no idea. So I feel like osteopathic medicine gives me the opportunity to explore the entire person as a patient and not just one little symptom.
Right, and
Go ahead, Eric.
if you don't mind. There's actually one very interesting experience that I had that drew me towards osteopathic medicine, which is when I sprained my ankle. It actually didn't recover properly, but the swelling had already gone down. So I actually spoke to a DO that then administered prolotherapy on me, which is basically re-inducing inflammation to the ligaments, because they're kind of poor in vasculation. They're not going to heal very well when it's not inflamed. So I thought that was a very interesting example of how the body could be naturally used to heal itself, and I think that's like a major focus in osteopathic medicine, and I was pretty drawn towards that.
Thank you. And now for our allopathic students.
One thing I'd like to say about that is, to be honest, I didn't know much about osteopathic medicine when I was applying to medical school. In fact, I was telling one of our students here on our panel that I wasn't even aware that it was a separate application process until it was already, past the point of where I could apply. And so I think that kind of speaks to, it's something that's out there. It's something that's obviously really amazing. But I feel like a lot of students really aren't having the opportunity, or it's not presented to them to be able to learn more about it. And I think that's something that's unfortunate. Having said that, so I can't really speak to the comparison of the two. I can say that I'm very happy with my program thus far in allopathic medicine, and and I look forward to having other opportunities where I can learn more about what, my future colleagues have been trained in.
So as a third-year student in Allopathic, we've actually done some of the similar things of finding other reasons of why you have had headaches. Obviously not to the extent of DO schools. But for me, it was more of, I kind of had an idea of what I really wanted to do after medical school, and I want to go into a field that's a little bit harder to get into, and I was advised that because DO schools are new and they're up and coming, not every program knows about them, and that you would have a better chance if I went to an MD schools, especially specifically going into surgery. Now, some specialties are great for surgery for DO, like if you go into orthopedic surgery, DOs work wonderfully there as well, but some of the other higher up specialties, some of the times you have a little bit more difficulty getting into them if you weren't an MD school. I'm also part of the Navy HPSP program as well, and I know that the Navy also does DO, but it was just, I had a bigger chance of getting into MD schools because there's a lot more of them, I guess.
Thank you. So a lot of our panelists are, wondering, when did you know that you wanted to be a physician? Is this something that you always knew? Is it something that was, you were naturally drawn to? Is it something you found out, junior year of college? So if we could start with you, Yolanda, and just talk about you discovering that this was the path that you wanted to take for your career.
So I did really poorly in high school. Didn't really pay attention to academics or even research kind of which career path I would take. I didn't really start doing that until I was at community college, and it was actually where I became involved with the AMSA group at American River College, where I was sort of introduced to sort of what it really means, like behind the scenes, to be a physician. As I mentioned before, I didn't have any sort of close family friends or any family that had been physicians, so I'd never really had heard that side, other than my only interaction with the physician was when I was at my own doctor's appointment. So that was the first time where I really heard what it actually entailed to work in a doctor's office, to be that doctor. And I was really inspired just from hearing physicians speak. I know it sounds really simple. I wasn't even in the clinic when I was sort of first inspired to pursue that, but that's when I was first introduced to the idea, and from there on kind of kept up or became involved with other sort of clinic volunteer opportunities or sort of health education, sort of clinically based programs, and just kind of further reinforced something that I really feel like I discovered on my community college campus. And so, so far, still feel like I made the right decision. Still early on, but so far so good.
Thank you. Jennifer?
So when I was growing up, my parents joked with me, and they said, you have two choices. You can be a doctor or an engineer. My parents were both engineers, and they worked in Silicon Valley. So I knew I didn't want to be an engineer because I didn't want to really follow in their footsteps. And every time I would go to bring your child to work day, it was very boring for me. So I've always had the idea that I wanted to become a physician because my pediatrician was so amazing. And she told me once that she loves her job because she gets to do cool stuff that lasts long. And I was always very fascinated by that statement. But I didn't really know that I wanted to become a physician until I was here at UC Davis, and I did all my internships. I volunteered at the Children's Hospital. I worked in the ER. I did cardiology. And just step by step, all these experiences solidified all of my childhood ambitions. So,
Laura?
So I was kind of always interested in medicine. My dad cut off his finger in a snowblower when I was in kindergarten, and I got to actually see them sew it back on. And I was always teased by my family, like, if you can handle that, you can handle almost anything. And but I wanted to make sure that I didn't want anything else. So that's why I went and danced with a ballet company and did many other things. And I never really thought I could handle being a doctor, meaning I was young, I didn't know what it would, I never had anybody before this pass away in my family. I didn't know how I would handle that, or handle telling someone, I'm sorry, I really don't know what's wrong with you. And it wasn't until actually when I lost my mom and I lost my grandfather and I was diagnosed myself with medical problems that I really kind of came clear to me that, I can handle this. This is something I really, really want to do, and kind of went back to what I was passionate ever since.
So I actually didn't know I wanted to be a physician until I was a sophomore as an undergraduate, and as a result, my grades kind of suffered during my first year, but that's another story. But I think what really drew me towards medicine is that I know this is very, I'd never say this in front of admissions, but I love science. I'm a total geek. But in addition to that, I really think that what I wanted to do is I've always wanted to try to make a difference in the community. And originally I was drawn towards English. I wanted to write about a lot of problems going on in the world, but I realized, what I felt is that if I could become a physician, I'd be able to make a difference, but also I'd have more of an ability. Well, I don't want to say that. I just feel like I would be able to make quite a bit of a difference with the physician title. That's all. Yeah.
Thank you. So a lot of you mentioned that you actually kind of solidified this career path, that you knew that you wanted to be a physician after you had some type of clinical experience or exposure in your case. Can you talk a little bit about how you go about gaining clinical opportunities, especially as a pre-medical student, whether or not these are paid or volunteer positions, how you would recommend going about being exposed to that? And we'll start with you, Eric.
Okay. I think it's very important to start from the ground up with your local pre-med communities. I think for getting into a clinic, at least at UC Davis, it was very important to have the right, credentials, but also to have good connections. So you want to build your network in the community, and you want to get to know people, and you want them to know you're not crazy, and that you'll be a passionate worker for the community. I think definitely getting yourself out there, getting to know people is going to help a lot.
I would reiterate that. So basically, there's a lot of different places out there to get clinical experiences. A lot of hospitals have volunteers that go through it. There's also different programs. I know in Southern California, there's one called, like I mentioned before, the Clinical Care Extenders, where you actually it's a little bit more than just volunteering. There's one here at UC Davis, as well as not beyond the clinics that they run, but there's I run a pre-med surgical internship program at UC Davis that students, undergrads, actually get to spend time with the physicians themselves, and pretty soon we're actually going to be expanding it to all of internal medicine and everything else. So just ask around, ask your family physician. When there's a will, there's a way. Even if you're in a very, very small community and there's not much around, just your little local physician, you can even shadow them as well.
Yeah, I was really lucky here at UC Davis because we had so many volunteer opportunities right at the hospital and at the local clinics, like Eric was just talking about. But I think the most important thing is that each internship or each thing that you do is what you make out of it. So if you just show up to your internship and you push gurneys and you take a patient from here to here and that's all you do, then I don't think that's really worth it. I think it's really worth the clinical exposure to talk to the people in the profession, ask for their opinion, ask if you can shadow them. It never hurts to ask, and you're just building all of these networking opportunities so that now these people know your face, they know who you are, and they know that you have an interest in medicine. And then maybe in the long way, they just might help you along the way.
So a couple of my clinical experiences, one includes being a volunteer with the bigger university hospital, and then another is sort of shadowing at a small clinic in Oakland where they mostly see patients without insurance and mostly Latino community, Spanish-speaking immigrants. So those experiences were vastly different from one another. While the university experience was sort of a good intro, it was much less valuable than being at a place where it was a little bit more intimate, and I felt that the physician could actually take the time and sort of mentor me a little bit and also allow me to have some valuable experiences. So I would say consider that. If you're just kind of delivering sort of food trays and pushing around gurneys, it might not be worth your time to continue doing so, but it is a good introduction to kind of the environment of a hospital and of medicine, and then just go from there.
Great. So now, on every panel, the attendees want to learn more about the panelists themselves. So we're going to talk a little bit about, and looking for personal stories here, and feel free to share as much as you're comfortable with. But, when you reflect back on the application process, what did you feel like were your biggest challenges? What were you worried about? What were you concerned about? Remember back to, when you're pre-med, and I know when I was, you're constantly thinking, what's that secret formula to get accepted? And you kind of create that formula in your own mind. And what we all realize, and that we hope that all of those members watching us here today realize, is that there is no set formula, right? Getting accepted into medical school, you will realize that your classmates come from a variety of different paths. But when you were when you were going through the application process, what made you nervous? What were you concerned about? What did you feel was a challenge that you had to overcome? And I know that's a big one to think about. Is there anyone that wants to start first?
I have
Go ahead, Yolanda.
so many things I was concerned about. I was worried that because I came from community college and I took all of my pre-med recs there, that wouldn't be good enough. I was worried. My Mcat score was a 29, and I thought there was absolutely no way I was going to get in, stay in California, or get into California, and therefore be able to stay in California. I didn't think I was a very good writer. I sound like I don't have a lot of confidence. I'm actually okay, but just the amount of self-doubt that you're presented with when you're going through this process. I mean, it can go on and on, but just and then so now being in school, meeting so many other classmates that have had the same sort of self-doubts, have that score. Mcat score that they're they weren't happy with, and still got into a really great school, and so just to kind of reiterate what I mentioned before, have more faith in yourself. Don't get too scared by the numbers that you see. There's a range, so I'm here to testify to that.
Yeah, I don't know what part of the application wasn't stressful or like, I was worried about everything. I was like, what if I'm not good enough to be a physician? What if all of these experiences, what if, everything that people have been telling me have been wrong all along? These were the self-doubts I had every single day. I would wake up, get a rejection letter, cry, think that I failed at life, and then, you move on from that. And I would go through it again, as long as I could still get one acceptance letter, because the first acceptance letter that I got, that was the most beautiful feeling in the world, that somebody believed in me, someone believed in my potential to become a physician, and I hold on to that moment, because there are some moments too when you're in med school and you're like, man, I suck. So, you just have to hang on, and truly, everything works out in the end, and it's going to be fine.
As I guess I was told that I had no chance ever to get into medical school. And so I had this big, huge uphill battle of, well, what is it to take? I thought there was that secret formula that, if you did research, if you did community service, and you did good on your MCATs and everything, and I had all that, and I was still told, you're not going to get in at all. So I guess it's more of believing in yourself, and, even if you don't have all of that, you don't have that perfect formula, whatever, tell your story. You have a reason of why you want to go into medicine, and that will go way farther than anything else. Any formula that you have, any publications that you have, to tell your actual story, and don't be afraid to say it. So for me, I had to actually tell them what I went through with losing my mom, losing my grandfather within 6 months, and then myself being diagnosed with pre-cervical cancer. And it took a while to get to that point, to be comfortable to talk to people about it, but in reality, it really showed and conveyed that no matter what you go through, you have a story, you have a reason of why you're choosing the things that you did, and every little thing that happened to you led you up to that moment. And just be secure and proud of yourself in that. Don't be over cocky, obviously, but just be yourself and know who you are.
Okay, well, I guess I have a pretty general worry that I had that I'm sure you guys all share, which is the Mcat. So it was a monster of a test, right? And it just seems so overwhelming. And I actually took Kaplan, Princeton, I did exam crackers, I did Berkeley Review, I did everything, right? But I guess out of all that, what I like to say is that do your best not to think of it as like a monstrous test, but think of it as like a journey, I guess. I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about, but like you're kind of like how do you say it? It's like you're trying to learn about so many of these fundamental sciences in the world. Like maybe, I mean, I didn't like Gen Chem very much when I was a freshman, and I felt that when nor physics, but when I had to know very well for the MCAT, right? So I kind of saw it as a challenge to myself, like, oh, you know, maybe this is the time to like kind of learn about all like those kind of little interesting things in the world, like oh, I didn't care about capacitors, but you know, oh, maybe like lightning storms are related to capacitors. Like you'll find something very interesting in every concept in the sciences, and if you hate them, you'll find a way to like it by just relating it to something that is kind of applicable more in your everyday life, or something that you're just interested in. And I think that helped a lot, just getting over the fear of the MCAT.
Yeah, and just to second on that, that will really, really help you, because part of being in medical school is you have many, many tests. I've already had step 1. I've had several different shells since then, and it seems like MCAT all over again times 10. And so just, you know, really finding stories, finding ways of what will help you through and what will make you learn the information best, and know that you're not going to have to know capacitors once you get into medical school. No one's going to ask you, like, hey, how does this all work out? You know, it's just one of those little hoops that you have to keep jumping through.
So you both have touched on, you know, one of the most dreaded topics, and that's the MCAT. So of course now we've received a lot of questions about, you know, when in your education did you take the exam? How did you prepare for the exam? And if you have any general advice that you did when you were preparing for the exam, or you know, now that you've taken it and you can kind of look back, is there something that you would do differently? And we'll give you a break from the MCAT, Eric, and go ahead and start with Yolanda.
So I took my MCAT, so I applied, June of 2010 is when I applied, and I took the MCAT May of 2010. So I was at the time working full-time. Well, I was serving as an AmeriCorps at a nonprofit, but it's full-time commitment. So I was doing that while studying. And it was really rough. I knew I didn't have a choice. I knew I wanted to devote my time to sort of getting experience with the work that I was doing. But it was definitely tough to do that while working full time. So if you are able to plan it out to where you don't have to do that, I would highly recommend that. The other thing that I did that I would not recommend is taking it, if you can space the time out to where you take the MCAT and then have some time in between when you're actually applying instead of bulking it all together, that also makes it much less unpleasant and kind of just spreads out your sort of commitment a little bit more. And I did Kaplan the summer before that, felt like I wasn't ready and decided to wait, but still use my Kaplan resources as study tools, and then dabbled a little bit with exam crackers, which I felt would have been, if I had to do it again, probably would have used that a little bit more. I felt like that in the end was something that made a big difference, more so than the Kaplan stuff.
I took my Mcat May 2009, and before that I had taken a Princeton review course, which I thought was really helpful. I'm a kind of person that needs structure in my learning, so someone needs to tell me like what to do and when to do it, and then that forces me to study the material. I also took the MCAT while I was still in school. I was still in my junior year at UC Davis, so I had, a heavy course load plus the MCAT that I was studying for. And I don't know if I would do that again because it was really rough. Probably not as bad as working full time, but I did feel strained for time. Like I felt like I had to either study for my MCAT or study for school. And if my grades drop, then oh my God, I'm not gonna get into medical school. But if my MCAT score is not good enough, I'm still not gonna get into medical school. So it's a huge dilemma all the time. So I guess if I could do it differently, I might have taken a little bit of time off, maybe done like the MCAT during the summer when I wasn't taking courses. But I mean, it worked out in the end, so I don't ever want to take that test again.
Wow, MCAT. Okay, that was a bit ago. So for me, I would say exam crackers is wonderful. I did Kaplan as well. So what happened for me is I took 2 years off, then I came back in my junior year, which is when you're supposed to be taking your MCAT because if you're a traditional student in that sense. And I was not ready for a multitude of reasons. A, I just took 2 years off and had no science courses during that time. B, I just went through the experience that I mentioned before. And so I waited. I actually was signed up. I was ready to take it, and I postponed it, which I really think was the best thing for me because you really want to only try to do that exam once. It's a barrier in itself, and so take it when you feel that you're ready. In that sense, do some of those practice exams that are out there that really, really helps, and do them in their entire course. It is a long test, and it needs to be done all at once. And now looking back at it, that little hurdle also helps you to prepare for all of your other ones that you'll have eventually, because unfortunately they only get longer, but it's still wonderful. It teaches you how well to study and when you're ready. So definitely taking those practice tests, I would say, and doing exam crackers.
So I actually took my MCAT after I graduated in 2009. I tried to focus only on the MCAT while I was also tutoring at the same time. But I guess some tip I would probably pass on to you guys. Like, you guys probably thought the verbal section was pretty hard, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so then if you guys don't know that, you guys are like first years or something, verbal section is notoriously variable, I guess. Someday you might do well, someday you might not. I think one strategy that really helped me was to make sure that you're timing yourself and you stick to a strict time limit for each question. I think there's like 7 passages and you have like 60 minutes or something, and just do the math. Make sure you stick to a very strict schedule, and if it comes down to it, like don't be like really anal with your answer choices. Just sometimes you're just gonna have to do like the 50-50, and there's nothing to do about that. So some people say to read magazines or read books. That personally did not help me. Reading speed is going to be a big issue on the verbal section. I personally have a bad reading speed, but just kind of little test-taking techniques like the partitioning your time. Also, be sure to leave Roman numeral questions to the last. They take a long time. And sometimes in the question stems, there's going to be, what did this word mean in the passage? And then be sure like you scan the questions first to see if they have that question, and you write that word down before you read the passage, because you don't want to read the passage and go back and hunt for it. So just little tips like that I think helped me. And yeah, so just be sure to focus on that, or you know yourself, like if you can't do the MCAT during your schooling, then you know yourself, you need to do it on off time, and that was me.
And just that being said, all those tips, if you do plan to take a prep course, you don't have to worry about getting all those tips down. If you're planning to get a prep course, you will get those. And also there are scholarships out there to cover the prep course costs, because they can run to about $2,000, I think. So keep that in mind if that's an issue. And then if you can't do a prep course, a lot of people are willing to give away their stuff after they're done with it. So you should be able to find that. And then the last thing I want to say is it's a monster, but it's only one small part of it. I know, I know that's hard to accept, but so if you feel like you didn't do as well as you wanted to, really think about whether you want to retake it or not, because it is just one part out of many.
Right.
And you'll get through it. We all did.
Thank you. So I will also say with the MCAT, when I look back on it, one of the things, I was actually the opposite than yourselves and a lot of my other classmates in that verbal was my strongest section. I was a bioethics major. Everything I did was write and read, and the science classes I took were the basic requirements to get accepted into medical school. And so I think, one of the things that Eric touched on is knowing yourself, knowing when is the best time to take the exam, but also knowing when to study and what to study. For me, it was much more gratifying to do verbal section questions and to kind of focus on that because I got a rewarding score. It was, it was much more degrading to do, focus on the physical sciences where I knew that, my score in my practice exam wasn't necessarily going to make me walk out of the room high that day. But you definitely need to know what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses and focus on your weaknesses. Focus on bringing your weaknesses up. If you identify that a certain area you're struggling in, even though you may not like the subject area, make sure that you focus a lot of your study time there, focusing on those topics. So we're going to switch gears a little bit and get away from that MCAT. And so now the MCAT is over and you've taken your classes, you're getting ready to apply to medical school, and you have, one of the next hurdles to tackle, which is your personal statement. And a lot of people have difficulty kind of writing this. What should I include in it? How do I talk about myself? That's often uncomfortable for us as individuals, for anybody. So if you could just kind of talk about how you went about writing your personal statement, and kind of what you learned in the process and any advice you would give. And we can start with you, Eric.
Okay. I think something that's very important, first of all, is to make sure you have a broad breadth of extracurricular activities, if possible, whatever you can manage. And I think that those are definitely going to be your lead-ins for how you're going to, you can't just talk about your curriculum, of course, right? So for me, I talked about my martial arts experience and kind of how the discipline helped me with the rigorous medical school curriculum and so on. But basically, you just want to have some kind of good extracurricular experience so you can lead in and show how that is going to transition over to a quality that will be good as a physician, and expand on that, I would say. Right?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Especially, if you're putting your heart and soul into this, so it can be pretty emotional and pretty kind of, heart-wrenching to work through and have to be looking at it over and over and over. So the best thing I did was I started really, really early. Like, I started a year before I was going to apply, and I didn't have a word limit at first. I probably had my first one like 4 or 5 pages, and then I gave it all to my friends. And some people didn't know me, which was a little bit more difficult. And I had them pick out what kind of made it stand out to them, what parts didn't work, what parts did work. And then I took all of those back and we worked it. And I did that over and over and over and over again. Then in the end, when I thought I had my masterpiece, I actually went to my friends who were not in science, because as being a science major, I probably was not the best writer. And I had them go over it grammatically and, word choices, everything of how to better improve it. And they made suggestions and I took them or I didn't, and I made it work. And so in the end, I had this nice conglomeration and story and everything flowed together, but it wasn't kind of the scientific-y type of paper. It was more of an actual story. And I think that's what most people are looking for, is your story. What do you have to say? And to at first not have to have that word limit and then worry about it later, I think that really helped me.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the story thing. So when I wrote my personal statement, I wanted something that I was going to be very proud of, that I could go back and look and remember why I wanted to become a physician. And I know a lot of people write about like, oh, they believe the prompt is saying, why do you want to go into medicine? So they write all these things. They list, their entire resume in this personal statement. So I decided to do the opposite. I wrote about when I didn't want to become a doctor, when I was crying in an emergency room because I hated my internship and I hated watching sick people, get even sicker. So I wrote about all those things, and it was a very personal story for me, how I was able to kind of like overcome that barrier, overcome the fact that sometimes you can't help somebody. And I felt like that kind of stuck out from all the other essays. I also took my personal statement to my English professor, Eric O'Brien, and he just like tore a new hole, which was really good, because in my head I thought this was the greatest thing ever. But then he was like, dude, you spelled this wrong. You missed a comma here. So definitely get somebody to read your personal statement, and if best, get somebody to read it out loud to you. Eric read it to me out loud, and I was kind of like really embarrassed sometimes. I was like, oh, I didn't mean for that to come out like that at all. So it's definitely, give it to a lot of people, give it to somebody who's not in science, definitely, and just, share it around, just get other opinions on it too.
So again, echoing what was already said so far, I took a similar process as Lara, in that I just kind of did a free write in answering the question, like how I got to the point that I was at. It was about maybe 3 pages or so, and I really wanted to do that because I just wanted to get my story down first, and then worrying about the word count and cutting out maybe what wasn't as significant as other, and what were things that I really was determined to make sure that remained in the personal statement in its final form. So that's something that worked for me, and also giving it, I would say, to anywhere between 2 to 4 people. It can get kind of complicated when you start to give it to too many people, so just keep that in mind. And also just take any kind of feedback with a grain of salt, just because in my personal statement I wrote a lot about public health and sort of the social side of medicine and social context when you're talking about health. And so for some people, if they're not familiar with that or the medical field in general, it might come off as that's not relevant because it's not science, it's not clinical. But we in the medical community know that is actually relevant. So again, just take that with a grain of salt, but use that however you may wish to better your statement. So I'll stop with that.
Thank you. So we're actually at the conclusion of our panel already. So we'll just go ahead and give each of you a moment if you have any brief final thoughts that you would like to give back to the audience today. Just knowing, being back in those shoes of being a pre-medical student, either getting ready to apply soon, or maybe a freshman just starting off in undergrad. Any words of wisdom you would like to pass on to the next generation?
All right, so I would just advise to have passion in everything that you do. You always hear about that, it's very stereotypical, but you just have to make sure that you really love what you're doing, and you know that you want to do it for the rest of your life. And it's not that easy to feel like that, but every time that if you do something when you're studying, try to find like little joys in what you're doing. It will make it a lot easier to bear. It'll prevent burnout. Just try to love what you study, and MCAT's hard. The application is going to be hard, but it's all for the greater good.
I would agree with that, because you don't want to get to your second or third year of medical school and be like, did I make the right choice? And I have several of my classmates that are that way. So the main thing is find a mentor, be passionate about what you want to go into, make sure it's something that you really, are considering, and that you kind of go through the resources. Also, having a mentor can also help you of when you get to that step of applying, what is the truth and reality about applying, and kind of will help keep your sanity in that as well. And know that, it's all stepping stones. And, the greatest hurdle kind of is getting into medical school. It is still hard once you're in, but do it for the right reasons, and you'll know why you want to do it, and just keep yourself, I guess I want to say, of just keep your passion?
So definitely have passion, as Eric and Laura just said. In his last show, Conan O'Brien said, what did he said, work hard, be kind, and amazing things will happen. And that's totally true.
I like that. I would say also just us past and present pre-meds tend to have a bad reputation sometimes. So just the pre-med community is a lot smaller than you think, so just be kind to your fellow pre-meds and think of them as your future sort of colleagues, future classmates potentially. And if you know it's what you really want to do, just be patient, know that self-doubt, everybody has that, and keep working hard and you'll eventually get to where you want to be, and it's definitely worth it. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it.
Well, thank all of you for being with us this afternoon, and thank all of you for watching and joining with us, and we'll be back shortly with our non-traditional medical student panel. Thanks.